All right, so in this video, I'd like to rehash what we did with our open folder, but we're also going to bring in an extension that's going to help us validate, which is what we saw in the last video. And so to reiterate, remember that we are opening and we are thinking about these as project folders and not individual files. So I want to open up this folder so that I can work on that index.html that we have been working through up to this point. So various ways that we can do it. We saw before that we can do File, Open Folder. And then remember that when we find that folder, if I double click on it, the index isn't going to show up. None of the files showed up because it's specifically looking for folders and not files. So that shouldn't scare you if you see that. And I could select folder at this time. You can also open your folder from here. You can also look at your recents and then it should find that folder. So there's that Hello World project folder. Or you can come to File and Open Recent and also find that project name or folder name. So whatever way you want to do to get to that particular project, let's do that. And there is the index that we've been working on. Excellent. All right. So in the last video, if you've been following along in order, you saw that the important pieces of validating our code. And we went to the website validator in order to validate our HTML. All right. Well, it turns out that there is an extension that you can install that will enable you to validate right here in our editor. So if I click on extensions and I start typing in, I already have mine installed because it takes a little bit of time, but W3C and then validator, you're going to come up to this extension and you're going to want to install it. Obviously, if I've already installed it because I have disable and uninstall, but go ahead and install that extension. And then I'm going to close out my tab once it's installed. And then I'm going to go back to my Explorer, my Project Explorer pane so I can see my project. And what will that do for us? Well, I'll show you. So now, if you look down here at the bottom of this window, the editor window, you're going to see this little verbiage that says W3C validation. And in fact, if I click on it, it's going to validate this code right here inside VS Code for me. So this is telling me that this HTML file is valid and it's perfectly happy. Excellent. All right. So what happens if we didn't do something correct? Well, let's try it. I'm going to move this paragraph into the head tag. I've told you already that this is not where a paragraph belongs. Anything that we want our users to see needs to be in the body tag. And so text for a user to see, I just kind of said that the same way. Things that we want to put on our web page should not be in the head tag. The head tag is simply for informational pieces that the browser needs in order to render your page. So this should not validate. Let's see. So I'm going to come down to my W3C validation verbiage and I'm going to click on it. And it does in fact tell me the HTML document is not valid and it's showing 2 errors. So you can also see those errors highlighted here with the red squiggly line. And unfortunately, when we get errors, sometimes they generate, just like we saw in the last video, it can generate, even though we have 1 error, in yours and my knowledge, we only have 1 problem, but it generated 2 errors because the editor doesn't really know how to fix that. So it doesn't really know what the intention was, but it definitely knows that something's not right. And if I hold my cursor over this squiggly red line, it tries its best to give me some kind of clue as to what's happening. And this says stray end tag. Well, unfortunately, let's see, it says the head element represents a collection of metadata for the document. So it's trying to give me some feedback to the best of its ability. It's not smart enough to say, hey, Kirsten, you're not supposed to have a paragraph in the head tag. It just recognizes that something's wrong. And so part of programming in any language is sometimes having to parse through and figure out the errors, even though they aren't super, super clear. And that just takes practice and time, right? So I know, okay, so I know that I put this in the wrong place. So what if I don't know? What if I don't know what's going on? Well, the last thing I did was I put this paragraph in here. So I'm going to take that paragraph out and clear my errors. So I'm going to clear all. And I'm going to try and validate again. And now everything's valid. So if I just do troubleshooting in small increments, and this is what I mean by that, now I know this is working. So because I only made 1 change, and that's the paragraph, I can sort of figure out that that paragraph is what's causing my problem. So now I'm going to go ahead and validate. Excellent. And here's an elaboration of what I'm trying to tell you. Validate often. Validate in small increments, meaning that I want to add an image to my page, and you're going to be doing images this week also. So I'm going to go ahead and add an image. So if I just put a whole bunch of H3s, paragraphs, all kinds of things, put my image, another paragraph, a heading, and a bunch of other things, and then try to validate, well, if something doesn't validate, I don't have a frame of reference of where to start to look for my problem. So what I recommend is doing it in small increments, meaning that right now my validation is working. So I'm going to try and add an image. So I'm going to add an image tag and a source equals, and you're going to learn about what all this is in a minute or in subsequent videos, but here's kind of a foreshadowing for you. And then I'm just going to put the greater than sign. Now I'm going to validate it. Because I validated frequently, I'm pretty quickly sure where my last error was. So if I don't understand the message that's being applied, I know where to look because this is the last thing I changed. So let's see, hold my cursor over it and it says an image element must have an alt attribute. An attribute is just additional information to your tag. So I have an image tag and then some extra information would be a source. And it's saying, and that we call that an attribute. There's that word attribute. It says we also need an alt attribute. So let's add an alt attribute and see if we validate. So alt equals, this is an image of Stitch. And you're going to learn all about this in some upcoming videos, but this video is intended just to show you about validating. So I'm going to clear all and I'm going to come back here and validate, and now my file is valid. So it's very important to validate, and I would recommend you validate often after very small changes to make it easier to figure out where errors might have taken place.